do have him drafted as a backup quarterback in a couple of leagues just because of that upside, but I think he's a wait and see approach kind of guy for me, so I will be taking a pass on him this week one.
No, I think that makes a ton of sense. And one guy that I do like this week, transitioning back into the guys that we're talking about here, a guy that I think that you can get for some decent price out there is Jimmy Garoppolo. I know he's been kind of poor, but I really like the pricing on him from a DFS perspective. So I think that in a game that is really quickly sneaking up on that Pittsburgh New England game as the highest projected game of the week. And with, just some of these point totals out here that I'm seeing, a lot of them are tending to creep up here a little bit, but love that you're, going against Kyler, and my Lions front, I think, is really going to put up a decent performance against them. So
I think I'm certainly going to endorse that Jimmy Garoppolo pick. I think this is a guy where you out of sight, out of mind sort of thing. He only played 3 regular season games last year before getting hurt. And prior to the start of last season, everyone was incredibly high on him. And he's still the same guy. He's got a healthier receiving core. He's got some better running backs behind him now. So I think and going up against Tampa Bay, which never hurts. So I think he's a guy that can certainly exceed expectations this week.
Yeah, that matchup's pretty tasty. I like Russ, but what I was going to say is I'm a little concerned with that game flow and how much Seattle runs. I think it could be a good game for Chris Carson. And with that, we should transition into the running back spot. I'll go ahead and throw Carson out there as kind of my start or my stud this week. Really like that Seattle offense quite a bit. Of course, now, they're a 10-point favorite now. So that's kind of really become ballooned up there to that double-digit total, or I should say that double-digit spread, which is pretty impressive there. A lot of attention on Seattle right now, but any running backs that you're looking at in particular that could be a value for us, either in DFS or some guys that you feel should definitely be starting that might be kind of fringe, flex plays or something like that in season long?
Well, there's one guy that I got my hands on as we waited to try to wait out the different holdout situations this season. And it doesn't look like Melvin Gordon's going to be playing anytime soon. So I got my hands on a couple of pieces of Austin Eckler. And I think he's someone that is a good play in season long and in daily fantasy. Justin Jackson certainly creeping behind him, making a push behind him. But I think he's someone that, kind of given the way the timeline went, and we kind of just found out for certain that Melvin Gordon's not going to be in the lineup, that he's a guy you can get for cheap in daily. And if you were able to snag him in season long, I'm sure you got him in the later rounds. So he's someone that can certainly be a valuable asset in week one.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good call. And, I should probably stick to some of these guys that are kind of fringy, flex plays, and some guys that there may be some decisions having to be made. And I'll just throw a scenario out there where I'm debating starting Tevin Coleman, and there's another league where I have a flex play where I'm debating starting Matt Breida. Thad, what is your personal take on the San Francisco backfield, especially with that matchup against that nasty Bucs defense? And I don't mean nasty in a good way.
I think this week, with regards to the Bucs, with regards to San Francisco's running back situation, it came as a bit of a surprise to see Breida listed atop of the depth chart. What's on the depth chart and what happens on the field can be two completely different things. I think this week, owners of Breida and Coleman, which include myself, we kind of lucked out because we got the best case scenario. This is a situation where both of these guys can do very well. and I certainly expect both of them to do well, regardless of how the whether it's a timeshare or not. I don't think it'll be a situation where one of these guys is excluded to the point where he doesn't have a good performance, whether it be in the running game or passing game. I think they'll both be involved in the red zone, in a high-scoring, up-tempo game against a bad defense. So I like both of them today, regardless of who's listed at running back 1 or running back 2.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And it's tough to really kind of have a grasp on what to expect in San Francisco when it comes to the depth chart because, we saw Kyle Shanahan basically just rag on Dante Pettis all off season, and then there he is listed as the starting receiver. So definitely going to be interesting. Like you said, it's kind of this meet and greet in week 1. So it's going to be fun to see kind of how these real offenses unfold. One situation in particular that I wanted to ask you about was actually in Kansas City. And I wanted to see how you think the whole Damian Williams and LaShawn McCoy situation is playing out. LaShawn McCoy, of course, is going to be that guy that's kind of the flex play and, guys that would be maybe debating playing a receiver ahead of McCoy. What's your take on the Kansas City situation now that game has a total, of 51? What are you thinking as far as how some of those plays or those touches are going to kind of flesh out in the Kansas City backfield?
Well, I think for starters, anyone who says that they know for sure how this is going to turn out has absolutely no idea what they're talking about because it is just completely up in the air. What I think will happen is I think Damian Williams will end up with the lion's share of the targets and the carries for week 1. And Andy Reid has never been a guy that's done a running back by committee. He's just never done it. And I don't think that's going to change. I could see if this was a situation where Damian Williams was looking really bad and it was kind of one of those situations where they really need some help. But that's not the case. I think the fact that LaShawn McCoy is coming in rather late gives Williams an edge in terms of being familiar with the offense. So I expect him to get the lion's share of the carries. I think from a season-long standpoint, you drafted this guy in the 3rd round. So you're starting him, because at this point, you probably don't have a lot of other guys that you drafted after him that have that similar floor or upside, unless you happen to get your hands on a guy like Austin Eckler or something like that. So you're starting him in daily. I think he makes for a good tournament option because number 1, he's not cheap. Number 2, with all the attention now being taken away from him, he's still in a situation. Even though it's a tough matchup, he's still in a situation where he could go out there and outperform and, be on a team that has one of the highest implied team totals on the slate. So I'm going to put my hat in the Damian Williams ring for week 1, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, and that's I was a guest over on the Dynasty Diagnostic last week, and we kind of had to take one take that we were going to go ahead and die on that hill, and mine was Damian Williams, and then I believe LaShawn McCoy was officially a Chief, I think 16 hours later. So so that held up well. But yeah, I agree with you. I'm in the Dame Williams camp as well. I just because of what you said, I think the last time we've ever seen Andy Reid really use any type of committee approach was, I think it was 2014 or 15 when Jamal Charles was hurt, and we saw a mix, I believe, in 2015 of Shark West and Spencer Ware. But after that, we had Kareem Hunt, was effective until the situation last year. But every year, he's those especially in PPR leagues, those Chiefs RBs. Andy Reid's running back, they're going to get you like 19.5 points every game. So very consistent, but I'm with you, Thad. I definitely think that it's tough to really know for sure what's going to go on. And you mentioned, some of the price points here. Just wanted to bring up a couple guys here for those who are playing DFS right below Damian Williams. He's priced at 6,300, of course, going up against Jacksonville at the Jags. That game is very interesting and appealing, not only because of the high point total that we just mentioned previously, but also because I really like some of these matchups in this game. And Leonard Fournette is one of those at a couple hundred less at 6,100, and Dalvin Cook at 6,000. Of course, we know how much the Falcons love to give up points to running backs, especially out of the backfield. They like to really give up a lot of receptions, really keep things in front of them. And for that reason, I think Fournette, he's gaining a little bit of steam, I think, from an ownership perspective. But Cook, I think, is going to be very popular here this week. And that's why I think Williams, to kind of get on the same take that you had, Dad, was that, the Damian Williams is a great tournament play just for that reason. He's just a little bit more than those guys, and he's definitely going to be a lot lower owned. So I really like those guys as well. Fournette, Cook, Williams as kind of a nice tournament pivot. Anybody else that you're thinking that you might avoid, whether it be in daily or season long this week?
One guy that I'm going to avoid in daily, and I'm going to use the word unfortunately, but I don't mean it the way that it's going to come out. I unfortunately have him in one season-long league, and that's Ezekiel Elliott. The reason why I'm going to avoid Zeke is because, he just got things wrapped up, and he's just coming into the fold, and he might be in shape, but there's a difference between being in shape and being in game shape. And, people complain about the preseason as much as they want, but there is some merit to getting reps under your team going up against opposition. And him missing out on all of that stuff, I think, is going to be a factor in week one. Also not getting those reps maybe puts him at an increased risk of injury as well. So I think that they're going to take it a little easy on him. The reports that I heard said that he would get 20 to 25 reps, which, under most circumstances, I'll take 20 to 25 reps from Ezekiel Elliott over pretty much anyone else. However, this is a scenario where in daily, there's so much value out there at the running back position, and there's so many other studs that are really close to his performance level, yet cheaper, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, that I can make easy pivots for those guys. I think in my one season-long league that I have him, I'm going to start him. I think I just kind of based on the situation, you kind of have to take what you're given. You have to be able to separate your daily mentality from your season-long mentality. And you have to take it a week at a time. And his security in season long is certainly there. So I'm rostering him more from that security standpoint. So I'm kind of splitting the baby, as they say. But Zeke is my main avoid this weekend.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I mean, there has been some recent studies that have kind of shown the propensity for backs to get hurt, after a holdout. I mean, you can bring, all your boys with you to the beach and simulate training camp, but it's just not the same as being at training camp. So I completely agree there. One quick question before we pivot over to running backs, that if you have Tony Pollard as a handcuff, or, if you're like me in a couple leagues where I have Zeke, I also have Pollard, one where I had to take him much higher than I normally would have been comfortable with because it was a keeper league. But for those of us rostering Pollard with this news, I'm with you. You have to start him season long, but what about Pollard? Is he a guy that you can throw back, or, is he a guy you'd like to hold on to? I personally have to activate or drop somebody to make room for a kicker. So having to fill out that roster and knowing that someone has to go, honestly, in one league, Pollard is the guy that makes the most sense for me. But are you hanging on to him if you can? What's going on there?
I'm hanging on to him if I can, because we mentioned the possibility, and I certainly don't expect Zeke to get injured, limited play or not, but the potential, the risk is increased there. And if something happens